Have you ever felt like a part of your life literally moves in reverse, or at least doesn't manifest as quickly as people that you see around you? Well, that might be because you literally have that planet retrograde in your birth chart. So this is what it means for each planet to be retrograde in your birth chart. And disclaimer, this is not bad, and literally everyone has some planet retrograde, so you are not alone. So first we're going to get into explaining what exactly a retrograde is, then we'll get into each of the individual planets, and at the end I'll explain some questions that you may have about some things that may or may not be true about retrogrades. The idea for this video came about because I did a shorter form of this on TikTok and a lot of people had questions, so just know that a lot of the ideas for these longer videos come off of TikTok, so if you ever like my TikToks and you want a longer video, do let me know. So first off, let's get into what a retrograde is astronomically and how that applies to astrology. So retrograde is when a planet appears to move backwards from our point of view on Earth. Their orbit never actually goes backwards, obviously. No planet can change the direction of their orbit, but depending on the speeds and the way that Earth's orbit lines up with another planet's orbit, sometimes that planet appears to be going backwards because we're going faster at that time. It's an optical illusion, but astrology is symbolic. It's why if anyone is ever like, the stars shifted, you're now a whatever sign, we know. In Western astrology, at least, it's symbolic. So we know that these things like aren't moving backwards, but that appearance is what matters. And that interpretation is why we delineate certain ways in astrology like this. So retrogrades are generally symbolic of revision, internalization, and introspection. Instead of pushing outward or building things new, a retrograde pulls inward and makes us look at what is old or we've done before. The energy of a planet turns reflective and inward, sometimes delayed or disrupted, like you're learning its lessons new from the inside out. So if a planet is retrograde in your birth chart, I want you to really understand that you are not doomed. It's not bad necessarily, although if that planet is in a really bad condition, a retrograde doesn't help. It simply means that your relationship with that planet's energy is different, and that has many different possible interpretations, but usually your direction to getting to what that planet means is kind of winding, delayed, or different than other people. Usually that planet's energy is more introverted, self-reflective, and sometimes it means that a lot of that manifests internally in thoughts more than outward in the world. You might even repress or redo constantly what that planet represents, and it might take some time to express yourself confidently in that area of your life. Basically, whatever that planet represents, Mercury communication, Venus love, blah, 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 we'll get into that. It's kind of like you're learning that part of your life more slowly, more awkwardly, but ultimately quite deeply. You might have to work harder at it or more thoroughly to get to its manifestation. So now let's get into what each planet means when it is retrograde in your birth chart. Obviously, the sun and moon cannot be retrograde. I'm not even going to explain that. Sun and moon cannot be retrograde. So Mercury retrograde is fairly common because it is the most common planet to go retrograde because its orbit is, it's the most common retrograde. So a lot of people have it. A lot of people with Mercury retrograde either, and I'm not diagnosing here, don't come for me, but a lot of them have either learning disabilities, neurodivergence, or something different about the way that they communicate. I've seen this be people who have ADHD, people who are dyslexic, very common for Mercury retrograde. It might also show that there is a lot of introspection or internal analyzation before you express things outwardly. You could feel like you are kind of afraid to express your thoughts outwardly some of the times, and this could be something where lifelong you are cultivating more confidence in your voice and in your mind. But a plus of this is that you could perceive subtext and patterns and communication underneath the surface that others might not. So there's a very reflective tone to Mercury retrograde, even if, for example, like you could have taken a while to read as a kid or something like that. That's not everyone's case, obviously, but if you have Mercury retrograde, you probably have something where you're like, oh, I did learn, or I do think a little differently. So next is Venus retrograde, which is slightly less common, but still happens. And Venus retrograde shows an internal journey around love and personal relationships and self-worth that might be quite a journey. And your relationships to self-love and self-worth, and therefore outer relationships, might be something where the direction that you go in initially pivots. So a lot of the time with retrograde planets, in a retrograde, for example, a planet appears to be moving backwards and then it switches and appears to be moving forward. In that same way, if a planet's retrograde, sometimes we can go in a certain direction, realize that we need to do a 180 pivot and go in the other direction. So oftentimes with Venus retrograde, the direction that we went in around relationships and self-worth and valuing our time and our energy, we really change that. So let's say that you thought that self-love and self-worth was like, I don't even know, because I feel like I don't even know what direction I would take with this, to be honest. I don't have Venus retrograde. Could be you thought that it was a bunch of trips and money and like spending a lot of money on yourself, but then you realize like, oh, that doesn't make me feel great necessarily. It's more about meditation, something like that. Or it could be the opposite. You could try meditating, find out spending money, and that's kind of the direction I took. But the direction that you took around love and affection and relationships, you might have thought that you wanted, you know, a certain type of guy. If you're a girl, probably 90% of you women thought you wanted a certain type of guy. You're like, I tried with the rat looking boys. They do nothing but sleep on my couch and take my money. I don't need that anymore. You know what I mean? You could learn. But generally it ends up manifesting in a way where your personality and your aesthetic taste and your relationships, they're deeply original. Like you came to that yourself. You didn't copy anyone else in your journey around that. So you also are probably someone who doesn't follow trends. Like you can't. You can't. And you might like affection to you, and showing affection is something that takes time to develop. So if someone gets your affection, you took time to get there. They deserve it. So next is Mars retrograde, and Mars and Saturn are the two planets where they innately represent challenge or conflict. So this is a planet where if you have it retrograde, it is innately going to refer to challenge or conflict, although that does not mean that you are doomed. It's because the planet itself refers to challenge or conflict already. So with Mars retrograde, if you were born during the day, this is something that could be a little more definitively challenging, although not necessarily bad or anything. But it generally is going to show that there is a questioning or a process of growing and trusting your assertiveness. You could really struggle with a will to act, with moving forward with things, or having like initiative early in your life. You could also have to like build yourself up a lot to burst out and do something. You could require a lot of inward conviction and enthusiasm before you do anything. You could also feel like you deal with a lot of anger or a lot of frustration for a long time and then it explodes. So there's a process of working very hard on things and then realizing that that's not the direction that's helpful, both emotionally or out in the world. And often it means that the way that you have to come to a journey about the way that you transmute your energy. Maybe you thought that you needed to, you know, express your anger violently or something, and then you learn about some form of working out that helps you. Like you usually end up on a path where you learn what does not work to transmute your anger or to get your voice or your actions seen or heard. You're like, okay, that doesn't work. I'm gonna learn to do yoga, or creatively, you might, I don't know, start a rock band or something in that trend. But there's a process of learning how to transmute your energy because your initial path, sorry, there's like dust on my mouth. I'm not picking my nose. There's like, oh my God. I have the dustiest fan ever. And sometimes like a gust of wind comes in the house somehow or something and it blows it. Oh my God. No wonder I have like issues everywhere in my house because I need help. How do you get dust off like a 15, 20 foot fan? How do you do that? Do you hire someone? Do you get, I can't, the ladder, I'm sorry for the tangent. Next is Jupiter retrograde. I have Jupiter retrograde, so I'm here with you guys. Jupiter retrograde often shows, at least from my experience and understanding, that is a great part of your chart. Jupiter's great, Jupiter's fun, but the process to arrive at that wisdom or that precipice of success or whatever took going in a very different direction. Like you knew that you were good at this, but you went down a different path. And it often shows that your sense of motivation or your sense of accomplishment in that area of your life is inward. You might know that you're great at it, but a lot of that validation is coming from within because it might not be the most widely seen or widely understood thing that you're great at this. It could be for yourself. And also this can show that you're very skeptical of opinions and guidance and the status quo in that part of your chart. Like Jupiter rules education, so it could be as if what came before you and taught you, you are questioning. You're just very withdrawn and from the idea of authority and wisdom in that part of your chart. You're questioning because you know that you're good at it. And it often shows that your growth and your progress is inward, not from external validation. So I have Jupiter in the third house retrograde. I have written so much for so much of my life, both as a very young child up to now. I do a lot of script writing on commission. And even though that might be the most constant theme of like progress that I've done, like I've written novels and whatnot, that's not something that ever has been able to get like as much attention as like one TikTok. You know what I mean? So like that is by far the most successful or like abundant thing in my life, but it's not something that a lot of people see or whatnot. Like all of these things get sold or get whatever. So I hope that one day that is more noticed, but it's kind of a winding journey because the forms of writing I've done have changed over the years. So that's an example of that. Now for Saturn retrograde. Like I mentioned on Mars retrograde, Saturn is already kind of a bitch. So it's not as if it would be good for people that don't have it retrograde. But with Saturn retrograde, first and foremost, I have it retrograde, so I understand this. The rules and adulthood and maturity for you came at a very young age. This is important, and this is a cool thing, is that if you have Saturn retrograde, it means that Saturn was moving backwards in the zodiac, and then a few months after you were born, it returned. So technically your first Saturn return was when you were like a couple months old, maybe days or weeks. But that shows that you had to deal with something at a very young age, like in infancy, that was a growing up journey that was very difficult. So like, I don't know anyone with Saturn retrograde who's like, infancy life was not fucked up. I've heard people associate this with absent fathers. I don't think that that's the constant. I think it's more of there was a coldness and a lack of affection and a kind of like you were left in the fucking wild, even though you were in the crib kind of energy when you have Saturn retrograde. This varies person to person, but it definitely is something that can come up with Saturn retrograde and can be very, very relevant with that. It also shows that your own rules and your own guidelines come from you. You do not listen to someone else's authority. So this is kind of similar to Jupiter, but it's less about being taught something and more about like the authority at hand. So Jupiter is like questioning the teacher, questioning the wisdom. Saturn retrograde is like questioning the power structures or the adult in the room. Like, why should I follow these like arbitrary rules? A lot of rule questioning. In like authority and discipline, you develop those yourself. You are self-motivating. Saturn retrograde people, either at a very young age, they had to motivate themselves and they are like the extreme type A people, where like me, up 6:30 a.m., gym every day, no question. Like that's just like part of the day. Then I clean my guinea pig's poop, and then it's just part of the day. You don't ask me. Like that's just what happens. And then there's some people who throughout their entire life, because they weren't taught that at a young age, they like have like it's one or the other depending on other things in the chart. But there's you had to raise yourself because you didn't have a role model. You did not have a role model early on, and you might feel like you might feel like you were born with some extra karma to process. I know I do. Now with the outer planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, I'm not going to say they don't matter, but they kind of don't matter. So many people are born with outer planets retrograde, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. It's a generational thing. It does not have a comment on your character or that part of your life really being different than if they were direct. They can suggest slightly that during that time, there was not as much rebellion with Uranus, spirituality with Neptune, or force for collective transformation with Pluto if they were retrograde. But usually it doesn't show up with you. It just can mean that at the time of your birth, that in the collective wasn't as strong, so you might not have been raised with that as much. But it's really private. I don't even go there. I'm like, you're reaching. If you're like the inward, if it's so inward, at that point you're reaching. I don't want to comment on it at that point. Maybe some more astrologers that have a better connection to that nuanced stuff. But like, to be honest, if you have Uranus, Neptune, or Pluto retrograde, you're not special. Like everyone has probably one, if not all, retrograde. So I don't even remember. I'm curious. What do I have retrograde? Let me see. Besides Saturn and Jupiter, let me see what I have. Uranus, Neptune, typical. Yeah, like most people. I'm not special for that, so it doesn't really mean much of anything. Also, the nodes. I get a lot of questions all over my TikTok. It was like, I have the nodes retrograde. Bitch, everyone does. So first and foremost, the nodes are not planets. So if something other than a planet is retrograde, it's like high key not as relevant. Like Chiron retrograde, okay, maybe the issues, the Chiron wound was more mental or internal for you. That varies chart to chart. I don't even go there, really. Unless Chiron is conjunct a planet, I don't even talk about Chiron. Chiron needs to be on something to be important in your chart. All the asteroids, I stand by that. They need to be on something or near an angle to be important in you in your chart. Not everyone has that archetype relevant, but I digress. The nodes are not planets. They are calculations of the north point and the south point of the ecliptic, the sun's orbit. So given their calculations, they by definition move retrograde because they're moving in a contrasting motion to the planets, basically. Long story short, the math of the nodes always moves them retrograde. There's some moments where you might notice they're not retrograde. That's just like kind of the math lining up or whatnot, but like the nodes move retrograde. So it doesn't matter if they're retrograde because one, they're mathematical points, not celestial bodies. So they mean very different things. North and south node, I have a full video on them, but like north node is volume up, increase, growth, obsession. South node is generosity, openness, apathy. They're not good or bad. They're not planets. They don't represent areas of life. They represent volume up, volume down. Having them retrograde once and for all does not matter because everyone does. They move retrograde. Different. They're mathematical, not celestial. Like I said, it's not bad if you have planets retrograde whatsoever. Many charts have like 2 to 3 retrograde. I'd say that's normal. I don't know anyone I've ever seen with nothing retrograde. So it shows that that is a more introspective and self-defined part of your life, and you can delineate that with kind of what we discussed with all of those. And it shows that that journey, that process that's inward, might not be reflected in the world as much as it is in your psychology, dependent on that planet. So if you have things retrograde in your chart, look to that house, look to what that house means, look to the energy of that sign, look to the behavior of that planet as a planet, and think of that as just like a different assignment where your growth is more internal, non-linear, roundabout, and you probably have a pivot of going in a different direction as you get into adulthood. And so you may bloom later, that's really common. You may take some time to figure out how to get on your own 2 feet in that part of your life. But let's say you have a retrograde planet that's like in a beautiful aspect, that can show that that journey is great. So you can have a retrograde planet in a great aspect. So do not see this as like something bad. It just shows all the things we've discussed. So just know that like your chart isn't broken. Everyone has something retrograde, and this is just what to know what that means. So yeah, if this helped you further understand your retrograde planets, please give this video a like, please subscribe, and please leave me a comment explaining what's retrograde. On these videos, I don't on all videos, but on these videos I do read comments because these tend to be videos that I'm interested actually in people's, charts and everything. So if you want more deep dives on astrology, if you want more information on these kinds of things, let me know in the comments. I like requests. I want to do more videos because I like these just free-form videos and whatnot. And yeah. Let me know. Have a good day or night or wherever you are and whatever. And I will see you in the next one. Sorry, that was awkward.
Oh, but there is one thing